Okay, hi everybody. This is an amazing turnout.
On your first point, Tony, there's no threat to Forest Row station at the moment, and I don't think there will be long term. We may well be having a proposal later in the year to close Mayfield Fire Station, which is much smaller.
So I've come along to the Parish Council full council meeting today, and this is one where I'm going to be asking a question, in fact a couple of questions, which I've actually swiped from our county councillor, Georgia Taylor, who drafted some questions that she wants to put in the near future to the county council around Gaza and what's happening there and what's happening in the name of the citizens of the UK, but not necessarily with our consent.
To know that many of the members here are of different political allegiances. Some are members of various different political parties. Many are not aligned with any parties at all. And of course, the most important thing is a parish council is not remotely party political. We are here for our community, and that is it. That's what I have to say on the chair's comments. Let's report.
You need a majority to get things through Parliament, don't you? So we find the same in the county council. Like quite often our voice is not heard because we're in the minority. So you do depend on the people to vote us in so that we can have that voice. That's the most important thing, and also it depends a lot on money, because we have, as a party, the Green Party has very little money, whereas the Conservative Party are funded by developers and fossil fuel financiers and all sorts of organisations that we wouldn't even accept money from. So you have the voice of those people in our democratic system, which is, yeah, don't get me started.
But as Georgia, as our county councillor, we vote you in. We expect you to be able to communicate up the level, and you're just saying how difficult that is. Is it unreasonable of me to expect the parish council to take a vote on whether they feel they should have a say in whether or not we demand a ceasefire with Gaza? Because some councils have done that.
I think that all councils have a bit of a confusion between, what their role is in terms of international issues, and that could include climate change, for example. And actually, the issue is that all of these things affect us, all of our residents here. So it is relevant for our residents. Yeah. It's not something that's just happening over there.
Yeah.
All of it is affecting us here, and so is relevant to us. And we do need to help people to understand what those connections are. So, for example, and I've been thinking a lot about this because I've heard from other councils that they've had it difficult to get it through.
And this is
because people say it's not relevant to our level of government, but actually it's all relevant, and we do need to try and use our power where we can. So but just making those connections, I think, is important for people.
Does the level of fantastic projects that they're all involved in and the support they're giving, remember, none of these people are paid who are on the parish council, they're all volunteers, and the amount of vision, and it was quite exciting. I haven't been to a meeting like that. So, having been a parish councillor myself in the past, I did find this really just lovely to see how this relatively new council, are doing such a fantastic job, and I massively support them. But I still don't feel bad about asking them these difficult questions and giving them a bit of a hard time about it, as politely as I could, because I just believe it's a good thing to do.
Right, lovely to see so many faces today, including some new faces that I've not seen before. That is always fantastic.
Dorothy is sort of experiment, if you like, social experiment, see what happened when I asked this difficult but very important question that has been quite divisive, I think, to see what would happen.
Okay, Susie.
Thank you. Take up 3 minutes of your time. So my question, I have a couple of questions for the Council. Does this Council agree with the International Court of Justice when they insist that Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent all acts contravening the Genocide Convention, must ensure with immediate effect that its forces do not commit any act of genocide, and that they should immediately improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza? And also, do they agree with the court calling for the immediate unconditional release of all hostages? In addition, can Forest Row Parish Council write a letter to the Foreign Secretary asking for the government to, 1, respect the international institutions that offer peaceful, legal and diplomatic avenues to end conflicts, and 2, begin by unequivocally backing an immediate ceasefire that ends fighting by all sides, frees the hostages, lets in humanitarian aid and creates space for dialogue. As our democratic representatives on a local level, I, and maybe we, but I certainly do not vote for our council to simply execute an administrative role. Democracy on all levels must reflect the will of the people and also the moral and ethical state of our country. If our government started rounding up a particular ethnic or religious group and persecuting them, would this council continue to discuss the allotments and street lighting as if nothing else mattered? Of course you wouldn't. As innocent children have limbs amputated without anaesthetic, whilst the UK government actively facilitates the genocide in Gaza, will this council say nothing? The UK's withdrawal of aid to the Palestinian civilians due to Israeli accusations, no convictions as yet, against 12 employees of the UNRWA out of 13,000 is a decision by our government which will exacerbate the ongoing horror of surgeons in Gaza needing to operate on women and children without anaesthesia, causing them often to die from heart attacks. Because that's what happens when someone cuts off your limbs or conducts an emergency caesarean section without anaesthetic. While our government sells arms to Israel, defunds humanitarian aid agencies, and does not work actively towards a ceasefire, will you, as our democratically elected representatives, continue to turn away? I ask the Council to vote democratically on whether to demand a ceasefire. If you decide to do nothing, then at least you will have bothered to have voted. Is that too much to ask? Oxford City, Liverpool City, Aberystwyth, Burnley, Bradford, the list goes on. Other councils, including town councils who have the same limitations to their authority as parish councils, have taken that vote. Silence is not acceptable. Making excuses and doing nothing could be interpreted as complicity. Thank you for listening.
My opinion, Susie, you've sent us many emails. My opinion personally remains very much unchanged on this particular issue. Among the elements you just said, one of the things you mentioned is, do we want to sit idly by as atrocities are committed? And one of the most horrifying facts of the modern world that we have to acknowledge is that atrocities are not in any sort of shortcoming right now. They are not lacking in the world. There's millions in need of aid in the DRC following the breakdown of the truce between the government and the militant group M23. The coup in Niger has left massive numbers of people without food or water. Myanmar currently has 18 million people in need of urgent aid following military takeover of their government. The war in Ukraine rages on. The war in Sudan has led to mass killings and displacement across ethnic lines, shutdown of critical health services, food supplies and more. There is ongoing, ceaseless, uncontrollable catastrophe across the world. And we are your local representatives. We are here elected to represent you on a local level. We are here to help with local issues. We are specifically not party political because we are not functionally a political organisation in that way. We are an organisation of an ultra-local capacity to deal with ultra-local issues. One of the criticisms you've levelled at us is that the Council in the past has made statements on climate change and supported Ukrainian refugees. And what I can say there is those are both issues that have significant impacts locally. The climate crisis affects every inch of the world, including every inch of Forest Row. And Ukrainian refugees flooded to the UK, including so many people coming to Forest Row. And so the council was able to provide amazing support for those in Forest Row. Statements about a crisis affecting Forest Row, I think, are within our remit to make. Support and aid for those coming to Forest Row, I think, are within our remit to make. Statements of an international crisis that Forest Row has about as much impact on as the Colonel Bakery does are not within our remit and would have no impact. And beyond that, I think we have very limited time. Already, David, our wonderful clerk, is generally a little bit optimistic of our timings. And already he thinks this is going to be a maximum length meeting because we have a lot we need to deal with. A lot of our meetings go to time. A lot of our meetings take up every minute that they can. And that's because we are not standing silent on the issues that we can control, that we can have some impact on. We are doing our best to support the local community in every way that we can. If we open the floodgates of making political statements at an international level, where does it stop? Yes, you clearly very much want us to make a statement on Gaza. Where does that stop? When do we make a statement on Myanmar? When do we make a statement on Sudan? When do we make all of these very difficult statements? None of them would go across in 2 minutes. None of them would be a minute vote and then move on with our day. Each of them would be a debate in themselves that could be taken up with work that could be done that would benefit the local community rather than a statement that would essentially be ignored.
Just to correct, it's not demanding a statement, I'm asking you to take a vote on whether or not you want to make a statement, this is about democracy. It's about, if we have the kind of lower rung of democracy where we will come out and vote, which is great, and we have an amazing parish council, but if there's so many limitations on what you can do in a situation that it's not political to ask a government not to fund genocide, as just by way of example, it's a reasonable thing, which is why so many other councils have done that. So it's about what is democracy, what's the point of us voting if when it comes to extreme sort of moral, ethical issues, we go, oh, well, that's nothing to do with us. And that, I find that concerning, just because it may not mean, because we haven't got Palestinian refugees coming into Forest Row, seems to be the reasoning. So that's my concern. So, but just to be clear, it's just ask, would you have a vote on it? That's all I'm asking.
Perhaps you could say it up with the MP then.
Oh, of course I have.
No, that's good. I think what Jason said is dead right in my opinion.
Unfortunately, she seems to be on the side of the genocide in her actions, at least so far. I can only go by the response that she sent me, which was basically, I'm not, there's people who've potentially ruined their political careers and have left councils and left parties, political parties, because they feel so strongly about this. So it's just not good enough, in my personal opinion, with something that's so serious. It's a thin edge of a wedge. At what point do you go, oh, it's none of our business, we can't do anything, or no, actually, we can at least have a vote on it. I'm concerned about what democracy means to us, and if you're going to engage people more in democracy, it needs to reflect things that, might be divisive. You might vote to do nothing, but at least you will have had a vote.
You say democracy, I think that's actually a really relevant point to make here, actually. You have posted very, very actively calling for people to email us. I've seen your posts across WhatsApp, across Facebook, all over the place, calling for people to email us. And barring the many, many emails I've received from yourself, I've received one other email.
Yeah.
I've received more emails about the potholes locally. And that's another thing we have no control over. If you're asking for a democratic decision, then, I mean, with regards to the process we're currently developing for taking votes and making big decisions, we tend to be expecting a little bit more community involvement than a couple of emails.
And again, that's interesting, isn't it? Because so many people have gathered, they've gone to London, they've gone on marches, and yet they didn't email their local, because they would say, oh, we've emailed the MP, and I'm going, but you've elected these people, talk to them. There's a disconnect there, which is worrying, actually, as well. And I know that's not what you want. You want people to be as connected as possible. But if you only want us connected with very, very, very local things, I can understand that's always going to be the priority. But just opening up the discussion to be had, which is what would happen with a vote, is whether or not there are occasions when you do need to stand up and go, actually, this is just something we should have a view on. So that's all I'm doing.
Thank you, Susie. Rebecca, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point because I think, I'm sure, I would imagine that many people in this room feel very strongly on this issue one way or another. And it's not to disregard that, to ask the question, so what is the appropriate venue and institution and point at which you voice that concern that can be an effective leverage on changing anything? And I think I would agree that the question really needs to be asked, does the local council here in the parish have that remit, or is it much more effective to lobby at the national level where the foreign policy is determined in the national government? So I think the fact that the parish council will decide whether or not to engage on this issue should appropriately not. It's not because there's a lack of concern of the issue. I think that there's a really important differentiation about the institutional remit of the different levels of government here, and therefore what's appropriate for them. It doesn't mean lack of engagement. It's just not appropriate, I would say, for this council to be dealing with that issue. But it is very appropriate to be lobbying the national government on this issue if you care deeply about it.
So my final question then is a genuine question. Is there no real connection between the elected members of the parish council and the other areas? I maybe naively thought that there was some kind of connection between the different layers of democratic government, or do you just work as a kind of admin group and we kind of have to leap over you to try and be represented and speak to those who we vote for?
I don't think it's about leaping over us. I think there is an element of you contact different organisations based on what you need. You don't contact us if you want the roads fixed because we don't have the ability to fix the roads. You contact Highways, you contact East Sussex. I think there are different people you contact for different situations and different crises. And this is a crisis beyond the capacity, the remit and the abilities of your local parish council. Sorry, Susan, I saw your hand up as well.
Yeah, no, essentially, my view on it is we are community members who volunteered ourselves to be part of the administration of our community, and that is what we're doing. What we then do on a personal level, because as was pointed out, there will be many who have very strong feelings about these various issues, including the ones that Jason spoke about. That is something entirely different, and if you are able to get lots of people together to go up to London or to send letters or sign them in that way, that would be very appropriate, and you have a special group doing that. But we are really about the parks and bus shelters and what have you.
So why did all those other councils vote then?
A majority of the councils you've referenced in all of your emails and posts have been district, county and unitary authorities.
Many of them have also been town councils as well, which have the same powers.
Again, all of them have different remits to that of a parish council. A parish council is fundamentally the most local, the smallest and the most focused on a very particular area level of government you can achieve. And there's a reason for a local level of government to exist, and that is to serve local people on issues that are very much needing a local focus best. There's a reason we don't have international diplomats. Forest Row doesn't need international diplomats.
But there are other town councils don't have any more additional rights, do they? To any more real powers? I know they're bigger. They're, parish is just a smaller version of the town council, isn't it? But there have been town councils that have.
There have been, and I think in general there is a feeling of, I'm sorry, Adam.
Yeah, I think there's a sense amongst us, we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this, but I think in the absence of everyone stepping forward and saying we believe passionately in this and we think this is the right thing for us to do, I think there is a consensus that this isn't our remit. You know, we all are thoroughly moved by this. We're all people who live in Forest Row. We're not necessarily aligned to Nazgani's organisation. I don't want to speak about people's political orientation, but she is very much part of this administration at a national level. It's very unpopular in government. It's very unpopular across all kinds of ministries. But we've been involved. The moment I checked out of trying to lobby the government was when 1 million of us went and marched against the Iraq wars, and we killed 1 million people in Iraq over that 10 years. Did any efforts at that time make any difference to our administration when we were directly involved? No. So I think it's just
But I, for one, am glad you spoke up, and many people are. And I think that's really what, to round it off, because I know you need to move on, that's what's important. It's the... I would hate to think that Parish Council feels so constrained by bureaucracy that they can't have a vote on whether or not they should or shouldn't or want to make a statement or not. It's not what the statement is, it's just the fact that you feel comfortable that you can have that vote and not just disregard it, because it does make a difference. That, I believe, the same way people going on those marches makes a difference. Because if no one does anything, then we're in trouble as a society.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this, Susie. I feel very connected to this cause. This is a subject, the topic that you're bringing is not just about, in fact, the conflict in Gaza, it's about our role here. And what you're bringing, I was not prepared about it, I haven't thought about it, so you're giving me a lot of food for thoughts. And this is too fresh for me to come with a clear-cut idea. I'm not sure there's a full consent, and in fact, with what you brought me here, I would like to go back home and sit on this and reflect on that, because this is a very interesting ethical question also about, and I understand that there's the pragmatism, we could say the remit, etc., but there's also a moral aspect with it. So thank you for bringing this.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, I believe that's, I don't think anybody else had a hand up for public participation. Sorry? Adam, did you have something to add?
All I was going to say is I know what Edward says, and I think having time to think about it is a good thing. I think you're missing, for me, you're mixing up what is important and what is a priority. I think what you're talking about is important, but it is not our priority. And I think it's distracting us from the things that we should be doing. So that's my...
Okay.
Okay. So moving on to apologies for absence. I believe that's one.
But the fact that you feel strongly enough to bring it to council should be justification in itself. And if somebody else wants to bring Myanmar or whatever, they can bring that. But why not? But it's the fact that it's in all our heads at the moment, isn't it?
And it's in our name, or not in our name.
Yeah.
I hope that maybe it'll start a conversation amongst some of them. And it's important to question, what is democracy? Of different versions of it, and what do we ask of it, and what do we demand of it? And really, I guess that's what I've been really exploring today.